evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening to all our followers and viewers all around the world. Welcome to Plain Talk. I'm joined this evening by the Chief Executive Officer of the American Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Nirad Tewarie. Good evening, Nirad.
Good evening, Philip, and good evening to all your viewers and listeners.
Welcome to the show. We had a relative of yours on recently in a different capacity.
So
I don't know if you got a chance to look at it. Um, yeah, Nirad, if I get somebody here from AMCHAM, the first question people are going to want me to ask is, with so much talk of sanctions, you being your organization being the front line where the United States of America does business with Trinidad and Tobago, if we ever do run afoul of the United States of America or there are anything like sanctions, I think the first tremors and reverberations will be felt through your organization. So is that correct to assume?
Well, I think the business community will feel it early. Um, I think it's also important to try to understand what the talk of sanctions would mean, right? So the country won't be sanctioned, individuals and companies will be sanctioned. But what that would mean is that companies here that do business, because we have so many companies doing business in the oil and gas sector, the petrochemical sector, companies that do business who have links back into the United States are all going to face additional scrutiny and is going to increase the difficulty in doing business for them. And therefore, it's just going to make the business environment less competitive.
What percentage of our...
Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't know you had something else to add. Finish that and I'll answer the question after.
Yeah. No, I mean, in the specific case that we're talking about, I mean, if Heritage or Paria were to be sanctioned as a company, there are significant implications for us, right? Because we now import fuel.
Correct. Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying. What percentage of our national trade in either direction is with the United States of America?
The US is still our largest trading partner.
Why did someone in the media refer to them as our second largest trading partner recently? I was wondering where that is.
Well, I mean, so if you take the whole of CARICOM, the whole of CARICOM would be more than the US, but the US is our single largest trading partner as a nation.
For export or for imports?
And imports, both. We have traditionally had a positive balance of trade with the US, meaning we export more to the US than we import, and that is because the largest market for our petrochemicals is the United States, and we still do ship, well, I mean, it varies year to year, but there are some petroleum products that still go to the US as well.
So, had cause to keep your members in the loop with regards to what's taking place on this rapidly changing political front?
What do you mean specifically? Sorry.
Well, against the rumors of the potential for the United States, especially in relation to seeing the ambassador of the United States of America step out of his diplomatic crease and put out a release to correct something that was said at the level of government. I'm thinking that is starting to sound like saber rattling. I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I see that Reginald Dumas and Martin Daly called it megaphone diplomacy today. It would be wise, generally speaking, to conduct foreign affairs, government to government, behind closed doors, and that does not mean that we give up in any way our sovereignty. We need to preserve and protect our sovereignty, but bear in mind that the US, like any other country, also has their sovereign rights and to do as they see fit, and that the reality is there's a power imbalance in that sphere, and so we need to negotiate that. That's always been a challenge that has been identified for the Caribbean and for Trinidad and Tobago, and that is how to maximize influence in the context of being a small state in the global environment. So these are new challenges. It's just how do we deal with them? And so,
Nirad, I just want to interrupt you for 1 minute. I don't know if Satish is hearing me, but Satish, we having an audio problem with Nirad. He dipped and is very low. I don't know if you're hearing that on your end, or if there's anything that we could correct on our system to fix that. Sorry, Nirad, Satish just messaged me to tell me that it was fixed. Could you repeat what you just said, if that's possible? And go back to megaphone diplomacy, because that's where the question began. Yeah,
no,
and you were suggesting that it is better that things be done in a certain way. Protocols and behind closed doors always was a better way for people to be, and so you could take it back from there.
yeah. So, traditionally, foreign relations around sensitive issues, particularly amongst friends, are dealt with government to government, government representative to government representative behind closed doors. And I was referring to the letter that was written by Reginald Dumas and Martin Daly today, in which they described what is happening now as megaphone diplomacy, and they suggested that that we need to, as far as possible, mend or smooth relations with our traditional friend and ally, the United States, and to do so as diplomacy is usually conducted when that is your goal.
Well, we as a nation, looking on at what is taking place now, there is a lot of concern in Trinidad and Tobago. The United States, you referred to it twice, is our traditional partner for a lot of our development through the years, through the decades. And for it to reach such a fast potential for strain is worrisome. It's raising the levels of anxiety in a country whose economy has had pretty much 4 years of recession, and with the collapse of Petrotrin and our energy sector, lack of diversification, the business community in Trinidad and Tobago, even the non-AMCHAM members do business with AMCHAM members. So I mean, we're interconnected, and everybody's looking on and wondering, where are we going?
Yeah, I sense there's a question in there.
Well, I know I'm leading you, but I'm hoping that you could guide that conversation and alleviate fears as somebody who any raising of anxiety, I'm sure that your organization would be responding and getting clarity, and maybe you could make that available to the rest of us.
Look, I mean, we would love to see a situation where the talk between the U.S. and Trinidad and Tobago, particularly around business, is not negative, is not fearful in any way, and therefore we have to be mindful of our actions and why we do what we do as a government. Now, foreign relations is a complex thing and has always been a complex thing for the Caribbean as a series of, or as a group of small states. And since independence, we have been, as the Caribbean, trying to negotiate that. And of course, over the years, um, some countries, the goal of one of the primary goals of CARICOM was to coordinate foreign policy. That quite frankly has not happened consistently in the Caribbean. Um, so how do we navigate this geopolitical environment that quite frankly is changing, and there are moves to reorganize several of the global multilateral institutions, and where do we play, where do we position ourselves? And these are all things that we have to discuss. And so what is happening at the OAS and how we interact with that body, what is happening at the UN, what is happening even with a body like the ACS. So how do we deal with state-to-state relations? So in this case, Venezuela and the United States, and then how do we put our national objectives in the context of principles and in the context of the interests of Trinidad and Tobago? Um, and let's be clear. While we have recognized Cuba and we were one of the first countries to do so, Venezuela today is not what Cuba was in terms of human development. So there, and we are not the closest country to Venezuela across the sea, to Cuba across the sea. Sorry. So we have to deal with the realities as they are.
I, and you use the word principles, and I'm thinking that the United States seems to be engaging in big stick diplomacy where Venezuela is concerned. We're being told that the Iranian tankers are on their way, and the Venezuelan um, military is going to be escorting them in the face of the United States pretty much creating an embargo. So if that were to if that were to become conflict, what do you see where Trinidad's trade with the United States of America is concerned? What do you see as any potential hazards along the way? Do you think we're safe? What do you see?
Well, conflict in our backyard is going to have impacts on us. I mean, just on the migration front alone. Uh, but it's very early to speculate. And I know a lot of media outlets are looking at it, and there's always the potential for conflict. I'm not aware that there's a blockade or anything like that. And I'm assuming that the Venezuelan military or its assets will escort the tankers within Venezuelan waters. Um, but I don't know. I don't know enough about it to speculate. But our position as a country, as articulated by this government and previous governments, has been non-intervention and non-alignment. So it would put us in a very, very further tricky situation with our nearest neighbor if there's an out-and-out conflict. But I hope, let me say, I hope that there will not be, and I don't see any indications of a direct conflict at this point, but I'm not a military expert.
I think we can stick up in there. I think we milked that question because people are going to want to know. They're going to want to know. And a lot of what we consume in Trinidad and Tobago, our choice products are American products. We've heard on the media that AT&T and T and DirecTV shut down operations in a 24-hour period in Venezuela. So we understand that things can accelerate quickly and that Trinidad is not set up to handle that. So I think that is the source of a lot of concerns, and a lot of the people who, when they saw that you were coming on the show, they asked me to get clarity on some of those topics.
Unfortunately, I don't have the expertise to answer with clarity. I mean, all I could do is speculate at this point, as anybody else would. But what I would say is that it's very important for us as a country and as a business community to ensure that we have good trading and diplomatic relations with the United States. It is one of our most important relationships, and we should do everything that we can to preserve it without, as I said, undermining our own sovereignty. And I don't think that that's in question at this point.
Okay. Shifting gears a little, does a company have to be dealing with the United States of America to join AMCHAM?
No. So once you are interested in trade, then you can join AMCHAM, and once you've been registered for 2 years as a company anywhere in the world.
What would be the benefits to Trinidad companies to join AMCHAM?
So a chamber of commerce is fundamentally an advocacy organization, right? And I tell people that in an ideal world, what we would be doing is working alongside InvestET and the other organs of the state to bring in investment into Trinidad and Tobago. Where there are things that need to be fixed in the business environment, we have to spend some time working on that. So there's networking, there's access. So we provide introductions to companies. So, for example, CSP, Caribbean Safety Products, is doing some masks, and we got them. We introduced them to UE and Tewarie, and they just tested their masks, and they now have masks that are 87%, according to Tewarie. The protection level is at about 80%, and so they are now producing flame retardant or flame resistant masks that also give you 87% protection against particulates and so on. So we just connected a company that is involved in transportation with another company that may have need for delivery services and the like. So it depends on what you want to do as a company. You get from a chamber really what you put in. So do you come and meet people? Do you contribute ideas? Do you ask us to advocate for you? Those kinds of things. But we also have a network of AMCHAMs. There are 25 AMCHAMs in this hemisphere, and we're all allied with the US Chamber of Commerce in DC. We meet 3 times a year under normal circumstances. This year we may only meet 1 time because we met earlier in the year in Atlanta. And so if you want to do trade anywhere in the Americas, we can open the door for you. We can't walk through it, but through the other AMCHAMs, the sister AMCHAMs, we can open the door for you so you can have a friend supporting you as you go into other markets as well. So those are some of the things that we do.
The Chamber of Commerce in Westmoreland, just call the Chamber of Commerce. They are the biggest Chamber of Commerce in Trinidad. Are they bigger than you?
By number, yeah, they're bigger than us. By number, they should be.
Doma Manufacturers Association, Chamber of Commerce, they're very vocal in Trinidad and Tobago, making recommendations to government on all manner of issues. AMCHAM, not so much. Is there a reason?
Well, I mean, we pick our issues. We don't feel the need to speak whenever there's an issue. I mean, there are many times the media would call and we say, there's nothing that we really have to add on that issue. So why talk just to talk? But we're very active. We submitted recommendations to the Recovery Committee. We had submitted 2 sets of recommendations to the government since we've gone into the COVID period. And we're very active around those things. You'd have seen us leading the customs issue at the airport, for example. And so where there are issues pertaining to trade and the business environment and the ease of doing business, we're quite vocal.
That tax on trade, was that in violation of any of the treaties that we have, trade agreements that we have with the United States right now?
Very, very interesting question. It's never been tested, but no, not with the United States. Unless it's in breach of the GATS, but the General Agreement on Tariffs and Services. But trade and services. Sorry, but we haven't tested it. I gather the companies did not want to take it to court. However, when that tax was announced, as you would remember, it was a tax across the board. And you ask about issues on which we were vocal. We stood up very, very firmly against it. We call it a nuisance tax, which we still believe it's a nuisance tax. And it was removed from both sea freight and from businesses, so that it's now only, so if I bring in a shirt under my name, it attracts the tax, but if I bring in that banner under AMCHAM's name, it does not attract the tax.
That's a bit of a play field, though. I mean, that is taxing end users at the end of the day. So we're encouraging profit, second-hand profit. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, we don't agree with the tax. In fact, that's in our Road to Recovery recommendations to include a a de minimis value, so a value under which you don't bother to tax goods because it's just a nuisance to collect the kind of manpower you need. It actually costs you more to collect those taxes than the value of the taxes, and remove the OPT. We still believe that is a nuisance tax.
You said earlier you advocate to bring in foreign investment, I'm assuming from the United States. Do you initiate, do you create avenues, do you respond to interest from the United States, or is this all generated on Trinidad side?
No, no. So we get requests from companies. Usually every year we would do, I mean, with trade missions and stuff, maybe a dozen and a half, 2 dozen companies that would be interested in coming into Trinidad and Tobago, or at least exploring it, and we'd introduce them to local companies. Some of them are just trying to sell goods in. Some of them are looking to invest. Some of them are looking to expand. And of course, working with companies who are here, who are having issues, we certainly try to work with them as well.
Diversification in politics in Trinidad and Tobago, we've been using it since the 80s, and we've never really diversified beyond the energy sector and petrochemical sector, Point Lisas industry. Why hasn't the United States taken advantage of our cheap labor and cheap gas and set up manufacturing for South America and Central America and the Caribbean here? Is it that we are not competitive?
Well, the facts of the matter are that we have been decreasing in our competitiveness ranking for the last 20 years or so. And more than that, our um, employer-employee relations score is quite low, and so there are issues around the industrial relations environment. But as I said, the petrochemical industry had been set up to really supply or re-export to the United States. When you take companies like New Iron is one of only 2 plants outside of the US of the New Corp company, right? EOG was set up, and we were our first first jurisdiction outside of the US that EOG operated in. We have a company called Myosin that's under some pressure now, but they have a manufacturing plant here as a company based out of Chicago. This is their only international manufacturing location. They do dental implants and the like. So some companies are, but I would argue, Philip, that we shouldn't devise a diversification or job creation strategy based on cheap labor. I think we did that very early on after independence, and we saw the impact of that when plants like the DuPont plant, the Dunlop plant, sorry, in the Southwest, and a couple of plants on the estate would have closed. What we should be doing is designing a development strategy that is based on knowledge, and in which when you
Our
create
strengths.
yeah and when you create jobs in those fields, and those people who work in those jobs spend some time in those jobs, it's not very easy to replace them, and therefore the company becomes more invested in Trinidad and Tobago, and the people's jobs are more secure. They have a higher standard of living. And so to me, it's not a strategy around your low wage, although you do have to start with where you are, and that's a reality. You can't take someone who is semi-literate and not accustomed to working a certain amount of hours in a fixed location and just expect them to be able to do that overnight. But there are many jobs where you can harness people's creativity, innate creativity, and teach them skills with the right vision and articulation of that vision, and then the execution of strategies to achieve the ends of that vision.
Post COVID-19, what do you see as the reality of because we're hearing about companies that are pretty much collapsing now and that the economy post COVID-19 is not going to be as straightforward as we might think.
Yeah. Um, I really don't know yet. What I can tell you with some level of certainty is that it won't be business as usual. I don't think the way we work is going to be business as usual. I don't think the way we learn and teach should or can be business as usual. I don't think that the all of the industries, I don't think travel and tourism will be quite the same. I think the way people interact, the level of PPE and what they value will also change. And so for example, with tourism, I think we have this fantastic opportunity because if you have small group, high value ecotourism, community tourism, I think that would be much more uh, in demand, say, than large all inclusives. I hope, for our sake, that is. Not, I mean, I hope the islands do well too, but I think that we can maximize a certain section of the market. I've always felt that we could do something with education services and post gate or the reductions in gate and the excess capacity in both the public and private institutions. If we had a sectoral approach, meaning the players get together and do trade missions to Latin America and were to bring in students here who wanted to learn in English, who for whatever reason couldn't get to the US or the UK, visa restrictions, cost, whatever, and they were to come here and they would get internationally accredited degrees from UE, for example, but also from institutions that have affiliation with foreign universities like the English universities and the like. You know what a difference 2, 3, 4, 5,000 students would make to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. And then what happens in time is that a portion of those students would want to come back as tourists, bring their families to see. It creates an outward demand for our products as their tastes acclimatize, new business ideas and fertilization. So I think there's that. And then, of course, there's technology. I think there's a huge potential for Trinidad and Tobago in technology.
I literally, I literally just wrote the digital economy as my follow-up question, but you're going into it seamlessly. So take it and go.
Yeah, I mean, I think our people are very, very talented and creative, and we have a huge cultural confluence with the United States. And because of where we are, same time zone, 3.5 hours from Miami, 5 hours from New York, 6 hours from Houston. I mean, when you think of the ease with which we could do things here, um, and understand instructions and collaborating in teams and the like, we could develop a huge tech industry in Trinidad and Tobago, and then
Again,
nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals. You know.
I wish I could screen because I just typed developing human capital to follow on the digital economy. You're going. I'll just let you talk then because you have a roadmap that you seem to have in your mind. So you just and when you stop, I'll ask any other questions that I have left. Because developing human capital for a digital economy for that new world of the digital industry. I mean, Jeff Bezos is poised to become the world's first trillionaire from Amazon. And we're not playing in the shipping game. Singapore's business model is shipping. Look at Singapore. They just eclipsed the United States of America as the most competitive economy in the world on just financial services and shipping pretty much. Why are we what is affecting our development? Our people, when they leave Trinidad and Tobago, you and I know a lot of people that go to foreign jurisdictions and they don't just survive, they thrive. What's keeping us from having a vision for Trinidad and Tobago? Is our politics damaging us as a nation where trade and development is concerned?
Well, I think that we can certainly do a better job of articulating and executing national strategies at the political level. We have said publicly for several years that there needs to be a greater level of bipartisanship so that we can pass more laws in support of the objectives that we have as a people. But I also think all of that must be in the context of what is the society that we want to create? Um, how do we organize our society so that there is fairness and justice, not in the sense of going to the court, but that there is merit, that hard work is rewarded. Um, and hard work could be rewarded vastly in some cases, but nobody who works hard should be in a position where they don't know how they pay their rent or where they live in and so on. So how do we organize a society in harmony with the natural environment? And what do we want to be? Do we want to be measured on GDP growth alone? Is that a satisfactory metric, single metric for us? Or do we want to look at human development and how the whole society, what kind of quality of life, what kind of access do citizens have in this society? And I think if we do that, there'll be many, many business opportunities because it cannot happen if it's driven by government alone. Government's role is to regulate where there's a public interest risk, stimulate where there's a need to create opportunities, and then facilitate. But other than that is really to get out of the way. And if all of the governments, all of the political parties talk about that, but when it comes down to brass tacks, I don't. It's much easier said than done. And so, if we genuinely engage in meaningful dialogue amongst the groups, and I am an internal optimist, so I am hopeful that the Road to Recovery Committee will be able to do some of these things, or at least start considering and engaging in a meaningful way and come up with a few things that can be
If I
done.
don't interrupt you and say this, because when has that ever been our experience in Trinidad and Tobago? And that's the problem. You speaking as AMCHAM, you speaking as AMCHAM, but you're a Trinidadian and you've been in Trinidad politics and you've seen it all up close. When has this ever been our experience, selfless, vision-led, anything? When?
Well, I do think that so to create the Point Lisas estate, and if you ever read that story and the role that the chambers would have played in that, Wendell Motley and Ken Gordon as leaders of that, as well as of course Ken Julian and the like. That was a good example of that. I think the decade of structural reform in the mid 80s into the first Manning administration, into some of the Pandey administration, you had a lot of positive things happening in the economy in that time, and it was interesting that it crossed three administrations. So it can be done.
You harken back to big industry development in the country and saying that this could cross different administrations, but yet when we look at other things like our water distribution, our management of law enforcement and our justice system, our education system, public health, when we look at these things, even our ability to maintain the infrastructure of the country, when we look at those things, we severely lacking. And regardless of the administration, we start things and another administration takes over and they abandon it. We still, you speak that, and for a minute I thought you were talking about a mature country, and then I remember we must be 100 halfway finished schools and housing projects just lying in the rain and the sun now for cheap politics. When does AmCham have a role to play in our internal conversation? Do you have any say or input in encouraging us as a nation to operate better?
Um, yes, we do. We are a member of the National Tripartite Advisory Council, in which there are 6 business reps. the CEOs of the major chambers, the ECA and the Tobago arm of the TT chamber, 6 government reps, 6 labor reps. That's not functioning as I would like. I don't think as anyone on the committee would like. But we continue to collaborate. Now we're not a political organization, so we wouldn't comment on the politics, but what we would comment on is policy. And so we would have been before various JSCs, whether it be on the Revenue Authority, the Data Protection Act, or whatever. So yes, we do contribute and comment. Not, as you say, not everything is public, but when we think we need to intervene, we certainly do so, and we're not afraid to do so. I think one of the most telling moments was during the FATCA debate. We were both praised and vilified, or praised and knocked by the government and the opposition in the same debate. So, I mean, clearly our positions, one, are being noticed, but two, are consistent in that we say what needs to be said when it needs to be said.
And I look at, I mean, we are always going to have to look to success models to say, why can't we emulate that? Trinidad and Tobago is so perfectly located. We are the only tropical destination outside of the hurricane belt, yet we do not take advantage of that. We're not a player in marine, we're not a player in shipping turnaround, we're not a player in cruise industry, we're not a player in tourism. Tobago is quite possibly the best tourist destination on planet Earth. We've made a mess of that. We as a country, when you look at, take India for example, when India decided that information systems and information technology would be a cornerstone in the development of their economy, look at how far they surpassed even their goals today. The top 10 industries in the world, the CEOs are East Indians that came of age in a country that has more information technology patents than anywhere else in the world right now. Where's our vision? If you speak for the trade between Trinidad and Tobago and the Americans, if you had to say Trinidad is this country, because we're not an energy giant anymore, we're not an energy country, what are we? What are we?
Well, I mean, factually, we are, well, up until COVID, we were still the largest producers of ammonia and methanol, or in the top 3 in the world. So, I mean, that's one thing. But we are still a country that is extremely adaptable. We are still a country where not always and not for everyone.
You're giving me hope that there could be a vision, but there's none. You're telling me what's left over from our development in the 80s and the 90s. But what are we as a country? You could take states out of the United States of America. You could say California by itself has the 13th largest economy in the world, and it's based on this and it's based on that. What is Trinidad? What is our economy? If you were to recommend to people, this is a place to play in this sphere, what sphere would that be, Carnival?
Well, I certainly think that that Carnival is not all that it should or could be. But part of fixing Carnival is fixing crime, because we have to be able to play mass behind the bridge comfortably, and that is when you'll get mass, the soul of mass, back, and where you will then find that there will be a natural resurgence, in my humble opinion. But no, I think there's a lot to fix, Philip, and I'm not here to try and argue that we are in paradise and where we need to be. We have been saying that we need a more clear national vision that has actionable aspects of it, and in which the various key pillars are interconnected. If you don't realize, if you say you want to build a tech industry, and you do that only and singularly without thinking of safety, thinking of healthcare, thinking of transportation, it's not going to happen. So we definitely need more of that interconnectedness. But the reality of where we are today is we need to stabilize the situation. We then need to find a way to stimulate some activity in the short term that could allow us to have longer term sustainable development. And I would argue if we very early put that in a context of what kind of society we want to create, then what kind of society we want to have, we're more likely to achieve what we need to achieve, and and get people to buy in and do their
But
part, whether it's sacrifice or contribute.
would you say we've been a plantation for a long time? We've had the sugarcane plantation, we've had the oil and gas plantation, and we've built economies around that. And people look for jobs and safe jobs that could pay them where they could exist off the benefits of growing old in that. But we've never really pushed further. I wanted to ask you another question, and this I want to ask you this early. The impact of the illegal narcotics trade. You touched on crime twice. What I know that the United States of America has repeatedly volunteered to assist us. I had access to information, the maritime security wall, and stuff like that that would end illegal narcotic traffic and gun traffic through Trinidad and Tobago. What do you think is the impact of that drug trade, money laundering, our loose laws where tracking dirty money is concerned, the impact of the reputation Trinidad and Tobago as being a terrorist training ground? These things, are they affecting American businesses from coming and taking a chance to set up shop in Trinidad and Tobago?
Right. So you've asked a number of complex things in there, but let me say this off the bat, right? If you have seen the maritime security wall or any other security wall that would stop, as you say, drugs and guns coming in, you should share it with the United States because they too want to stop drugs and guns coming in. And I say that facetiously, of course, to say that it is it is it is all but impossible to completely stop it, right? So what we have to do is make Trinidad and Tobago so unattractive, so much more, increase the cost of doing business to the narco traffickers, right, in Trinidad and Tobago to the point where they will go somewhere else until they can be completely eradicated. So I
But
agree completely. And to be fair to the
but
government, go ahead.
the Americans donated scanners for us to use on a port that 50% of the shipping containers come straight off ships, leave the port without so much as a look inside, and we've never used them. How do we defend our, you say you can't completely eradicate it, but we're not even trying to put a stone in their way.
Yeah, I think we're using some of the scanners now. I think they commissioned one or two in the Port of Spain, and I think we have some in Point Lisas. But we need to do more for sure. And when we do find stuff, and we do hear that that stuff is found, what happens to tracking back to the original source, right? But to be fair, I think that the government and the Attorney General made this a big part of his effort in office, um, have tried to strengthen the laws around anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. And to be fair, um, when there was a discussion around the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau being under the Office of the Attorney General, which was put there under a UNC Attorney General initially, and we made a statement about it as well. The government did move that back under the exclusive control of the police. So it appears as though they are putting the framework or more of the framework in place to go after and to facilitate the um, white collar crime and money launderers. But there is still a lot more that needs to be done. and there's more that needs to be done in terms of strengthening the FIU, and allowing for greater collaboration and investigative powers a la St. Lucia. Believe it or not, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a center of excellence in anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. I happen to know that the director of the FIU over there, or the equivalent, is in Trinidad quite often and collaborates and participates in a number of training activities. And that is a simple, easy source of potential collaboration.
Yeah, but Nirad, you talk about that, and I'm saying this because you wore many hats and you were involved in politics, and you must have seen the ease with which dirty money is spent in politics. The FIU don't track that. That's not accounted for at any level of political disclosure until we have things like, I mean, you say the FIU, but what about the Integrity Commission? That needs some teeth too. What about campaign finance reform? Because without that and the procurement legislation that is now languishing for over 5 years, until all of those things happen, the Attorney General could put frameworks. I mean, moving the ACIB was almost counterintuitive. It should never have been under a political organization if it is an arm of law enforcement in a country that says it has a separation of powers. But the holistic approach to ending white collar crime in Trinidad and Tobago has never been undertaken really by any government. We get piecemeal things. So we get an integrity commission, but it has no power of arrest, it has no search and seizure, can't compel witnesses. So it literally informs and it tells. The FIU similarly. Going forward from here, shouldn't we be insisting on those things as a suite of measures to protect from white collar crime, money laundering, and drug trafficking in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yep, absolutely. The procurement legislation is something that we feel passionately about, that we've advocated about. One of our past presidents, Ravi Suryadevara, was a key member of the private sector civil society group that was working on amendments to the legislation, and we were very vocal about attempts to move government-to-government arrangements outside of the procurement legislation. We still are. And so, yes, we need those pieces of legislation passed, and we need a genuine and holistic approach to fighting and combating money laundering and, well, by extension, terrorism financing, for sure.
Nirad, hour flew very quickly, but you answered a lot of very important questions. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come and do that. I appreciate it greatly. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And as we tell everybody, in your closing comments, take as much time as you need.
Well, it was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity and for the questions. I hope that we were able to provide some level of, I wouldn't say clarity, but some more information that would be useful as people understand the situation and try to make their decisions. It's a difficult time for all of us, but I do believe in the future of Trinidad and Tobago. I do believe that our best days are ahead of us. And I also believe that there is still a lot of opportunity individually. I hope that it would be more so collectively, and that we can, in our lifetimes anyway, start to enjoy the paradise that we have here in Trinidad and Tobago, not just as business people, but as citizens as well. So thank you very much.
Indeed, thanks a lot, Nirad. It was an absolute
My pleasure.
looking forward to conversations. And Trinidad and Tobago, technical difficulties and hiccups aside, I mean, Satish Ramsaran was doing his best, him and the PEP Media team, to keep the ghosts in the machine at bay. But Nirad Tewarie, Chief Executive Officer of American Chamber of Commerce, AMCHAM, as we refer to it, was very forthcoming. He gave us a lot of information, and his optimism gives me hope, seeing that he is somebody that has a sneak peek into the playbook of what a future could be. Trinidad and Tobago is so desperately in need of a vision for itself. Its people sends children to school, and ask children what you want to be when you grow up. Parents don't even know what direction to steer their children. They send the children to university, children get a degree, and then have to go and live abroad because there's no way for them to maximize their potential in Trinidad and Tobago. We should have a vision 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, what this country wants to be, playing to our strengths, maximizing our resources, our assets. And the greatest asset we have is our people. The people of Trinidad and Tobago, we operate at the highest levels of the world. You go anywhere, in any sphere of industry, a Trinbagonian is there, and they're operating at the highest capacity. We don't just survive when we go. We really do thrive. We become incandescent. I have seen Trinbagonians. I love getting the information that this one is the best in the world, that one is the best in the world, and that this one. I just saw a Trinbagonian, a young lady, Amon. Her last name is Amon, and she is a physicist, and they were interviewing her, and she's from Trinidad and Tobago, and we have so many good, bright people that we're wasting. We don't have a vision for the development of the country. Take for example, if we wanted to get into marine development going forward, then you would need something like a marine university giving people the opportunity to excel in sailboat development, sail making, sail rigging, engineering, to shipbuilding, and all of the engineering that goes into that. And those people, once trained, could then either work in existing industry or set up service industry to that industry, and that's how industry grows. And we could use our position in where we are in the world, because shipping has to play a critical part in Trinidad's development. We built a waterfront around the Hyatt, and we were going to be the financial center of the Western world. But this is a country so corrupt and riddled with drug money that nobody was going to come here. We were trying to emulate Singapore, and Singapore got away with it because Singapore has very stringent law enforcement. They don't play the fool with that. Yeah? Our law enforcement is lax. With the right connections, you can get away with murder. And we need, as well, to face these shortcomings. And we have to understand that where we want to go calls for a development of us as a nation, but us as individuals as well. You can't call for law and you break the law. Or you can't call for laws other than the laws you're breaking. We can't write laws that some could break and some can't. We can't have, you have drunk driving laws, and you have driving under the influence, and you see well-heeled people go into court and with 900 highly paid attorneys and get rapped on their knuckles, and a poor person goes to court and ends up in jail or ends up in a massive fine. And that's unfair, and it sends the wrong message reverberating through society. Those of us who ever hold public office, any type of public office, we have a responsibility to send a message to the rest of the wider society that Trinidad and Tobago is a place where all the people should have the same access and the same treatment before every office of state. Because if we can't do those things correctly, we're not going to develop. We'll talk about it. We've been talking diversification since the 80s. That's almost 40 years. 40 years. In that time, Saudi Arabia diversified, the Kuwait diversified, the UAE diversified. In that time, Norway put away $1 trillion. In that time, Holland put away $600 billion. In that time, India set its sight on being a global player in information systems, and they are the global player in information systems. In that time, Singapore went from struggling to having the most competitive economy in the world. In that time, people who had vision and who followed the keys of success to identify the goals identify where you want to be, and make a decision, make a list of all the things that you have to accomplish as a nation, as a people. What do we have to put in place? What infrastructure do we need? What education facilities do we need? What support systems do we need? We dodged bullet after bullet with Point Lisas. That we never had an explosion in Point Lisas that required a burn unit, because to this day we don't have a burn unit in Trinidad and Tobago, and that's what was supposed to be built when the Cuba Hospital was built, and we never even faced that. We've been playing games. Nirad Tewarie, as CEO of AMCHAM, but as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, he lamented that Carnival is nowhere near what Carnival could be or should be. But we don't play with all our faculties, it seems. And if you allow others to come and determine what we are, we'll forever be looted. We'll forever consign our people to being laborers and consumers instead of developing our human capital. And it starts with a vision. It starts with a government that understands, because yes, government's job is to facilitate, and government's job is to guide, and government's job is to secure. But government can also create the crucible for the development, and government could set the vision and set the tone and remove the obstacles for the smaller people, because you're going to need a lot of people to play. Singapore knew that they needed a large population to get to where they wanted. They moved from 1.5 million to 5 million people. They are half the size of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad could easily have a population of 10 million people. Yes, we don't only measure success by GDP, but GDP is critical and important. And Singapore, half the size of Trinidad and Tobago, has a GDP of 322 billion, and we have a GDP of 22 billion. And they don't have oil and gas, and they don't have a pitch lake, and they don't have Tobago. We do not maximize any of our assets. We do not operate the nation state of Trinidad and Tobago effectively. We've spent at least the last 32 years of our politics in bacchanal and noise fighting. We've been fighting each other for all of our independence. We've never grown up. We've not matured. We do not have a vision for Trinidad and Tobago. And thank God that there are people like AMCHAM, the Chamber of Commerce. And I want to tell them, because I've hit all hard, but I also want to say that if we put this country together properly, where the Integrity Commission, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, if all of it was functional, if all of it was blind to access and nepotism and favoritism, if all of it followed every creed and race finding an equal place, and we making sure that all our people had the same treatment in front of every office of state, Trinidad and Tobago would rapidly improve. We set the tone that we want to be a corrupt, wild and rabid nation, and that's what we get in. If we set the tone that Trinidad and Tobago is to be first world and develop and lead the world in these spheres of industry, we would quickly get there. Our people have been looking for a vision for a long time, and we've not had that. I think it's time to get there and to marshal all our resources and all our bright minds and get all of them rowing in the same direction. Leadership happens when leaders come together. I'd like to thank Nirad and AMCHAM for joining us tonight. And tomorrow's Friday, and we have Devant, Maraj, and the weekend review. Last week Friday was really enjoyed. People have been messaging me and calling me all during the week to make sure it's on for Friday. So it was a nice show, the weekend review, the wrap up. There was some humor to it. I think we might have some more tomorrow. Yeah, so until tomorrow, stay safe, Trinidad and Tobago.